When I appeared in another location, I looked around and saw nothing but trees and grass. I heard a noise that sounded like pounding. I headed toward the noise and ran into Captain Picard. When I saw him, I said, Captain. Then I heard the noise again, and I looked over to where it came from, and I could not believe my eyes. I was looking at a Starfleet officer. Judging by his uniform, he was from the late 23rd century. Then I got a good look at his face. I said out loud, Kirk. James T. Kirk. He looked at us and said, beautiful day. After I recovered from staring at him, I said, oh, yes, it is. Then I realized what that noise was. He was out here chopping wood. Something I heard about, but never tried. He put another log in the stump. I asked if I could take a whack at it. He said, sure, and handed me the axe. When I got into position, Captain Picard took a couple steps back, and I said, oh, gee, thanks for the vote of confidence. I raised the axe and swung it down, and split the log in two on my first shot. As I handed the axe back to Captain Kirk, I looked at Captain Picard and said, I thought you learned not to underestimate me. He got a good laugh out of it. I looked at Captain Kirk and said, would you happen to know what's... And before I could finish, Kirk put the axe in the tree stump, put his hand up and said, do you smell something burning? I sniffed the air, and it did smell like someone wanted something extra crispy. He went inside the house and said, looks like someone tried to cook some eggs. Captain Picard and myself stood at the door. When Kirk looked at us, he said, you can come in. It's all right. It's my house. He looked around and said, at least it used to be. I sold it years ago. Then we introduced ourselves. I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard, and I'm Captain Jonathan Dibble of the USS Enterprise. We're from the future. He looked at us, then looked around the house, and found things that he should not have had, because he gave them away. Then a female voice from upstairs said, come on, Jim, I'm starving. How long are you going to be putting around in that kitchen? Captain Kirk recognized the voice. Antonia. Then he looked at us and said, the future. This is the past. He went to a chest and opened it to reveal what looked like a horseshoe. He held it and said, the day I told her, I was going back to Starfleet. He went over to the counter and grabbed some eggs. All dairy and eggs, her favorite. I was going to make them to soften the blow. I looked at him and said, Captain, this isn't really your house. All of us are caught up in some kind of temporal nexus. He cracked the eggs, opened it, and put them in a pan. He looked at me and said, dill. I looked at him confused and said, sorry? Dillweed. And the captain. Behind the oregano. I then realized what he wanted, so I went to the cabinet and got the desired spice. As I was scanning it, Captain Picard asked Captain Kirk what the last thing he remembers. He thought for a moment as I gave him the spice he wanted. I was in the deflector control room on the Enterprise B. Then he handed the pan to Captain Picard so he can ready a tray. Stir this, will you? Picard grabbed the pan, burned himself a little, then stirred it. Kirk continued. The bulkhead gave away in front of me, and the next thing I knew, I was outside, chopping wood. You two walked up. Thank you. Then he took the pan away. I looked at him and said, sir, history reports that you died, saving the Enterprise from an energy ribbon. He looked at me and said, you said you're from the future. I said, yes. Then he asked, and I'm dead. I said, no, not really. Like I said, we're all caught in some kind of temporal, and he said temporal ribbon, I heard you. He put the eggs on a plate with some bacon, and then put them on a tray with the flour. Then looked a little puzzled. He said, something is missing. But that toast popped out of a toaster, and he put them on the plate as well. As he was walking off, I really got down to business. Captain, we need your help. I want you to come back with us. As I was talking, he headed for the stairs. We need to go to a planet, Meridian 3. We need to stop a man called Soren from destroying a star. Millions of lives are at stake. When he got to the stairs, he looked at us and said, History considers me dead. Who am I to argue with history? Captain Picard looked at him and said, "You're a Starfleet officer. You have a duty." Kirk snapped at him. "I don't need to be lectured by you. I was out saving the galaxy when your grandfather was in diapers. Besides, I think the galaxy owes me one." I was not happy with Captain Kirk. Kirk stepped down and talked to me. "I was like you once, so blinded by things like duty and other Starfleet things." He smiled and said, "Not this time." He walked up the stairs. "This time I'm going to walk up these stairs, march into the bedroom. I'm going to ask her to marry me." With that, he slammed the door shut. Captain Picard and myself walked up the stairs and stood in front of the bedroom door. I put my ear against it, but I did not hear anything. So I threw the door open and found myself in a stable. I looked around and saw Captain Kirk. I went over to him and said, "Is this Antonia's room? Because if it is, it's taking the phrase that I raised y'all in a barn way too far." He said, "This is even better. This is my uncle's barn in Iowa. He taught me all I know about horses. And if I'm right, this is the day I met Antonia. 11 years ago." He opened the barn doors, turned around and said, "This necklace is yours. I love it. I get to try things all over again." With that, he hopped on a nearby horse and rode off. I was wondering what we were going to do now when I heard a weird noise. I turned around and saw that Captain Picard was putting a second saddle on another horse. He turned to me and said, "I'll help you out." I smiled and said, "No, thank you. I'll just fly." And we raced to catch up with Kirk. We found him just as he was jumping over a pretty good gap. When he knew we could hear him, he said that he must have jumped that 50 times, and it scared him to death every time. But not this time, because it's not real. Then he looked up and said, "Neither is she." I looked at what he was looking at, and it was a woman who I assumed was Antonia. I looked at him and said, "Come back with us. Make a difference again." He smiled, looked at me, and said, "So you're both captain of the Enterprise?" Picard said yes. Kirk asked me if he was thinking about retiring. Captain Picard said he was not thinking about it. And Kirk said, "Let me tell you something. Don't. Don't let them promote you. Don't let them transfer you. Don't let them do anything that can take you off the bridge of that ship, because while you're there, you can make a difference." Then he looked at me and said, "What's the name of that planet, Viridian 3? I said, "Yes." Then he said that he was guessing the odds were against us and the situation was grim. I said, "Oh yes, definitely." He smirked and said, "If Spock were here, he would say that I was an irrational, illogical human being for taking this on." Sounds like fun. We all laughed, and all three of us left the Nexus in a bright white light.